So first of all, I do have to thank Melissa, who covered the other sections. I believe it was last month, where she went over the other components of the needs assessment. And we do usually do the accountability section separately, just because some of the complexities and the details that are overall. And from what I heard, everyone really enjoyed the presentation, so it was very educational. So I hope we find the same details what I have for you today. But again, if we want additional information later, just feel free to reach out to me. So today's session is going to be focusing only on the 7 accountability measurements that we work with. They are listed here on the screen. We provided within your needs assessment through the grants for me system a copy of just a couple years of data that we had on file for you folks to look at. So that has been uploaded. Each one of them carries its own passcode, and those also have been uploaded to your accounts. If for some reason the passcode doesn't work, or you have some hiccups with it, let me know and I can work through those with you. This year, I think it has been a better process than we did 2 years ago. And again, I took the feedback that you folks provided, both in format and structure, and actually even the speed and format of the spreadsheet itself, to do a better job at providing the data. I wasn't expecting that you folks would have to be using the spreadsheet again. The department just is still lacking getting our data into the data warehouse, but that is in development, and I hope to have that to you soon. I first wanted to spend a moment and just kind of give you folks a heads up on what your need assessment is not. I really want, when we've done this over the years, it's been a challenge because some folks, when they look at it, saying, they may look at your individual measurements along with your program size and say it's so small that it's hard to statistically come up with an analysis. And that's 100% correct. The pool size is very small sometimes, and challenging to come up with that true statistical analysis. But the overall needs assessment isn't just focused on that. It really is looking at your overall process of the indicators. How are you satisfying them? And what can the data tell you? It's not so much just looking at the indicators to say, did I meet it or not meet it? Because you folks do a great job every year with that as you look at your grants, and you address that on a yearly basis. This is looking at kind of like those long-term, bigger picture items to say, well, what are we hoping to do with our indicators? We're hoping to grow them. Is there something that's causing some concerns that we continue to miss the indicators? Are there some trends we find? And through the years, I've heard some great stories from some directors who have looked at the data and paired up several pieces of information together to find out, gosh, and for example, maybe in my automotive program, my students with students that are economically challenged have a lower pass rate. So they thought maybe they could put some time and attention into seeing what could help in the long term to address that. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want you to do, is to look at, does the data, when it's broken down, help you identify some of these concerns? And we give you the data that we have, both at a school level, because that's how you're measured, but at a program level too. So you can look at programs to say maybe one or another one may have some strengths or weaknesses that you could bring to other programs. So we do that for an internal evaluation of yourself, so you can kind of look at that. Um, but I think one thing that I found over the years that has been consistent in my personal findings when looking at both individual school data and statewide is the second biggest thing is the data collection issues. Over time, locally, you may have a data person who has been outstanding, been with you for multiple years, understands exactly what you need to be submitting every year, and it goes like clockwork. It's seamless. But that individual may move on, and then you get a new person in, and they're doing a fabulous job, but sometimes some things fall through the cracks that they just don't know. And CTE is so unique in that sense that we have reports that are different that most schools don't think of. For example, like one of our indicators is to collect data around what are students doing after they leave your school, after they graduate or leave secondary education. That's not something that's reported in a meaningful way, uploaded into our systems that is related. So someone from your central office that may be new may not just know that has to be done every year. So again, when I look at this information, that's where I find most of the issues. After we've done some internal evaluations of our systems, and we even find internally sometimes we may have some not data corruption, but more along the lines of misalignment of information that doesn't quite fit our needs. We found that more some older Perkins, but with the new Perkins 5, we really try to put an emphasis on individual schools measuring themselves and looking at data collections locally that they can have impact on. So that a lot of that has been cleaned up, but it does happen from time to time, which during the presentation, I'll demonstrate some of those areas. Another thing, we want you to look at trends. Do you see one program that really has taken off over a couple years, and you really think this could be something that long term is something that is going to continue to grow, and maybe you need to look at how to expand certain programs. You may also find, which we find too, is some programs just lose student interest over the years. They no longer have that pull they once had. So you may need to possibly change that program. And this is your opportunity to look at that kind of data to see where can we maybe make some changes in a long-term setting to address those. As an example of that kind of trend would be years ago, just normal IT was very hot. It was very sought after by our students and very well enrolled. But as we've gone over the years, Joe and I see more applications coming in that folks want to turn to, like a cybersecurity or something along those lines, because students are not so much interested in rebuilding computers because they've become more disposable over the years. And most larger some programs don't really work with large computers. They're either work on laptops or even just handhelds, just because they're more popular than it was 20 years ago. So as times change, we do as well. So this is an opportunity with Perkins 5. They wanted to look at those instead of just assuming that we continue running the same old programs that we've done in the past. So with this, I want to also share that the data we have provided you is just a very small piece of what you can use. It's not intended to be your only source. It's just what I have available that I can share back with you folks at this time. The big goal that Dwight and I have been working on is once we get our data into the warehouse, you can look at it for multiple years. So you can look at it instead of just the 2 years I provided you, or even looking at your data set from a couple years back that only had 2 years. Maybe you look at over 8 years or 10 years worth of data. We had in the department here, we had a big changeover in 2018. So our data set then became much more robust and clean. And I think since that time, we've done a much better job as a department to really focus and bring that data in so it's usable. So it's been consistent. But things change. Then you'll see as we go through the presentation, there's our evaluations, our state assessments changed. So all of a sudden, then our data doesn't line up very well versus what we have as measurements because they were assessed on an old assessment. They were designed and built off an old assessment, and now that no longer exists. It's changed something else. So once that changes, those old values no longer are consistent. So it's just a limitation within our current system. So I always encourage schools to pull up other data sources, like maybe you have some local data that has been done by like your local workforce board. Maybe your Chamber of Commerce has done some local assessment data that you could see about programs in the area that might be doing well or jobs that are going to come on board in the area they think. Another great area is your student exit surveys that you do, and I believe you have data you submit to Melmac that you could also use for insights to do this. So we encourage you to use multiple sources. Even your PAC committee meetings may have insights to what they're asking and saying what programs should be. So you may see when you look at your data, a program over time has had lower enrollments and your values are not as good in a program over time. And you can relate it back to, well, the industry's changing. And that's what you're hearing from your PAC committees. So it's good to use multiple sources like that to kind of get a robust picture of what's available to you. So I have a big thanks to Director Graves up in PI. I asked him if I could use some of his data to do a walkthrough, just because I think it's easier to see some of this information in the spreadsheets that I provided versus just seeing a slideshow and kind of go through there. I want to be a little bit more interactive for you to see it because it's challenging not to have all the availability, all the options you could look at one time. It's hard to bring that up on one screen. I was saying that it's also hard for me to go through all the indicators, so I picked one that I think is missed or fluctuates the most. I shouldn't use the word miss. So it changes the most. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. And a great example, Presque Isle, their data set does demonstrate this. So it's going to be a win-win for us in this at this time. So the first thing for our new directors, we at our website, which Emily keeps up with, does a fabulous job at keeping up on updates to our webpage and everything like this. She built us a link so you guys can go directly to your accountability information. And when we designed this, back when it was Donna, Dwight, and I were talking about it, I really wanted to do a layout, and they had some great insights as well that we're going to make it, instead of using the federal language, we're going to use some plain language on how the stuff is done that makes it a little bit easier to understand. And also, we want to lay everything out every year's worth of data, both on the screen, on the webpage when you first get there, and also within the grants for me system. We didn't want to provide you with one letter like we did for Perkins 4, and you had to go look for that letter every year and kind of refer back to that data set that was sent to you over time. We wanted to give it to you every year posted so it's more accessible, because we felt as though the easier we make data available to you, the more opportunities you have to use it. So when this presentation is released with the slide deck, you're going to be able to click on this link and it'll take you right out to our webpage. Currently, right now, the data we're working on our car. Once we get everything done, the grayed out section you see here will be updated with some new information. But we're going to really focus on the aspect of what's in the PDF that you see on the right-hand side of this table. That's where we wrote the definitions out for how we do our calculations, just to make it a little bit more simple and a little bit more clear. Because historically, we may say something along the lines, a certain kind of student is measured by XYZ, but you never knew how we actually calculated or found that student. So now we have provided that as part of the definition to clarify that process. So for this example, we're going to look at 3S1 and kind of go through that for Presque Isle. So when you click on the PDF, it's going to bring you up to what's in the actual Perkins law. It'll actually list out there what the act says is the definition. But then there's also a section that we wrote up that says main definitions. And this is a little bit more plain English language, I should say, that demonstrates what we are measuring. So for this example here, for 3S1, is asking for your numerator to be a count of secondary students who left secondary education and then have gone into either post-secondary option education, advanced training, which here in Maine, we consider that registered apprenticeships. Did they go into military service? Did they become a volunteer? Or are they employed? This is the overall activities that the feds want us to measure. So we're asking you to look for that data and to provide that. And then overall, the denominator is what is just your overall count of your CTE students who left secondary education. So that carries two parts to this part of the equation. Carries one, you need to know how we come up with the list of concentrators, and two, you have to know, did they leave secondary education? When the warehouse is eventually finished, you'll be able to find out when students leave and why they left. Currently, right now, I do have the data sort of in a NEO report that you can look up, but it only tells us if they graduated or not. So it doesn't tell us if they're employed. That's all part of a process that you folks have to do a survey to your students to actually get the rest of the data. But from one part of it, we can get that information so far. But I also rewrote the question too in a little bit different format, just so it's a little easier to read it. So really, like I said, the formula is you're looking for, basically your numerator is any student that meets these criteria versus your overall list of concentrators. So.
John, you do have one comment or question in the chat. I think you touched upon it, but I just wanted to let you know it was there.
Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I apologize. I'm working up two screens and I'm trying to. Could you read to me, Joe? I just can't seem to get to that part right this second.
Travis is asking if the meeting asking to look at our minutes.
No, I mean, you'd want to not, if you find some details that you've provided, like in your narratives, when you write in your needs assessment that relate back to the PAC committees, you'd want to maybe submit that as supporting evidence if we ask for it. But we don't need all of them kind of uploaded at this time. Thank you, Joe. So this is how in Perkins 5 we are defining a concentrator. It is a student who is attending your school for 120 days. excluding weekends and holidays. So what we do is we look through the system and get information about when they started your program, when they left your program, and do a calculation on that. So that's why it's always important, I mentioned in the past, to always make sure those dates are pretty precise, because you want to have as many concentrators as you can for this. And you got to remember, when we look at this, we're only talking about what qualifies for Perkins, not what the state of Maine says is a CTE student. So just remember that part, because they don't align. And we get this question all the time where someone may say to us that, the state of Maine has the lowest concentrator rate, or the lowest participation rate of most states around the country. Well, it's all depends on how you define that. There's some states around the state of Maine, or around the country, that they have over 100% participation, which doesn't mathematically make much sense, but they just do it by like courses. So in the state of Maine, we don't have courses, we have programs. So that's why these numbers will vary, but just for the state of Maine, this is how we calculated it. And when we actually break out the data for that 120 days, that comes up to about 2 courses of a 3-course program amount worth of time. So that's how we found that data, looking at it with the feds. Okay. All right. So here is a report that's available in NEO right now to all directors that you can go out here and find. And I did notice there are some director or assistant directors on here as well. If you like to have access, that's something you can request through the NEO system. If you like to have somebody else at your school to have access to these reports, we can get that set up for you. So you just have to, go through the process and submitting a request for that. But as part of the report that we currently have built, this report is mostly designed to verify information that you upload to the state of Maine, that you can go into this report and verify that it's there. Because sometimes in the past, there was no way for folks to, the system might say that, yep, all records were received, but you can never see if it really took all 200 of your kiddos. So I built this report so you folks can go out there and look at this anytime to verify all the students are appearing as you expect. And that's including students that may be taking more than one program. Sometimes if they're not put in correctly, it could get filtered out. So this is a good way to verify it. But this is an example of how you could use that report that shows the start and end date of a student to do your own calculations to find out if that student qualifies as a concentrator for part of your calculations. So this leads to another question that has come up quite often is, now that I know I got the data showing that you sent us about what my values are, about what are my negotiated values, where does that fall? So those are done back in, I think it was in early part of 2024 as part of a needs assessment. Back then, we at the time, I believe it was Dwight and myself. I think I'm not sure if it was Melissa or Dawn at the time, but we did a 4-year set versus just a 2-year set. So it helps you folks from having to keep going back and forth every 2 years and crunching the numbers and coming up with the data. We did it for 4 years and tried to do a longer projection to help with less of a burden for you folks. So for doing that, your actual negotiated values still reside in that original one from 2 years ago. So there might be multiple ways to get there, and I do apologize. I have not mastered the grants. For me, I can do what I need to do and get in there and see things, but my access might be slightly different from you folks. But the way I find it is for any school that I'm looking at, in this example here, I pulled down Region 10, is I go back and look at it 2025. We did it in 24, but it was actually for 25, just like we're doing it now in 26, but it's actually for 27. So when you look at your documents library for that year, you should see your needs assessment, and in the needs assessment, you should see the bottom of it is your negotiated values. And I got a screenshot that will show you what that looks like for new directors in case you haven't seen it yet. At that time, it was our first time using it, so we actually provided instructions of how to go through the process of opening it up. And also, Melissa uploaded your passcodes for that year. So you open up the document and you'll get the actual code. Then you open up the spreadsheet and you can process from there to get your data. So again, I do appreciate Director Graves to provide me an opportunity to use his data so I can show you what that looks like. This is what the screen looked like a couple years back. Again, this was your negotiations versus just the findings. The top section was just kind of telling everybody what we were doing as a state. And you can see the data we had at the time for the feds. We only can use the last 2 years of data to calculate what we need for our calculations to move forward with our negotiations. So we wanted to do the same for you folks. We didn't want to hold you accountable to something longer than what the feds are holding us accountable for. So another big change between Perkins 4 and Perkins 5, everyone had their own measurements. Before this, for the life of Perkins 1 through 4, everybody had the same measurements. So it was very challenging for, I'll use an example of a school, let's say a Aroostook County school, let's say Van Buren or St. John Valley, to meet the same indicators that are set forth by the entire state. And you're talking a school the size of maybe Portland or Lewiston. So it's very challenging for those schools, and every year they'd have to come up with their improvement plan because the data was based at a state level instead of a local level. So working with Dwight at the time, we came up and said, no, why don't we go ahead and give everybody their own levels and do all the calculations separately. It creates a lot more work on our side, but it actually makes a lot more sense for you guys to compete against yourself. You're not competing against a school that you could never achieve just because you don't have the same population. So it's unfair, and we decided to do it that way. And I think it's worked out well. It allows schools to really focus on what's important to the school versus trying to come up with 4 or 5 improvement plans because you missed 4 or 5 indicators, versus now you only have to focus on one and really do a good job on one because you missed one by a little bit versus being 20 points off or something for something you'll never be able to achieve. So that's why you'll see a lot more data than we had historically. And again, we're going to focus on 3S1. And you can see here, once you got to the state level, historically, we also, before Perkins 5, we'd ask you to keep going more. So even if you're at the state level, we'll say for 3S1, we'll say at the time it was 60.47, and you're coming in this, for this example, you're coming in 89. We're saying no, you got to get better than 89. Keep going more. And it's like it was kind of unfair where the school had already achieved what the state levels were, and we just kept piling more on. So we changed the mentality as well and said, if you achieve the state level, just maintain it. You're doing a great job. Stay right there, please. And if you can do more, absolutely. We'd love to see you continue to grow and do better. But, we're not going to ask you, we're not going to force you to put improvement plans to do something that's just not achievable. So in this case here, you can see for the example for Presque Isle back then, they only had one area they really had to focus on. And that's where they need to put their attention on. And once they reach the level, then after that, they could just maintain. Okay. So with that said, I'm gonna go into the old spreadsheet and kind of take a kind of poke around a little bit and show you a little bit, and so you can get some feel for it. So just excuse me for just 1 second while I switch sources here. Should be able to see it pretty well, I hope. And this is what the old spreadsheet looked like. You typed in your passcode at the top, they gave you all your indicators, and everybody had a different code. So, when you first logged in, it may look something like this, just because it didn't have your passcode available, but you typed it in. And then it actually went through the different queries and actually pulled up your individual data. So this is what your future years are looking at right now. This is where you could find your values, what we're expecting, and these are what comes in to your grants for me every year. This is the data that will appear there. I'm going to continue to do that, put that into your grants every year, and we're actually huge thanks to Melissa. We work together, and she's changing the format of the grants. So instead of you having to, we put in only 3 years for the data and it kind of would rotate. Now we're going to post all 4 years at once. And that way it stays consistent instead of trying to guess which year we're working off. Sometimes it got a little confusing. So we kind of fixed that this time too. So this is how you would use the old negotiation spreadsheet to come up with your value. So I do want to also look at this right here. I just have to switch this real quick. There we go. So one thing I want you folks to know, though, is data has its limitations. Even though you have your data we sent you, you have your list of what you achieved and all this. Sometimes data is only as good as what we get, and we're presenting back to you what we have. But 100% of the time, I make mistakes, and you folks can always call me out on it to see if there's something that needs to be double checked. I'm happy to do so. So here's an example of a school that when I presented them their data, they said, gosh, Sean, it doesn't make sense. Back in 2024, we didn't even get to 1%, but in 25, we got to 85, over 85%. I agreed. I said, yeah, that doesn't look right. And luckily, I see these when they do pop up before you folks get them. So I'd already investigated what had happened, but I was happy to go through the process and double check it and share with that director what the information was. So you'll be seeing the same thing when you look at yours, and I'll do a little demo after this with Presque Isle, and we'll look at that information. But in this case, here's one that's way off, and your first assumption is something's wrong. And you're right, something is wrong. It could have been a calculation that I did, could be the data set that we get from our big data folks above me. Maybe they sent me something wrong. It's a great example of questioning is not a bad thing. So in this case, I got questioned on it. I said, yep, we'll take a peek at it. So when we looked at the data, when we start breaking it down, and just as a snapshot, you can see in this example here, they had 110 kids that met the definition for this example. And I'm only seeing 1 female student and 0 male students. So again, doesn't say that the school did anything wrong yet. Just maybe I did a calculation wrong, or our data collection was wrong. But something doesn't look right. Just to say out of 110, only 1 met the definition of in that numerator. So that led to, let's look a little deeper. And this is where we start diving into the data a little bit more. And this is a screenshot of what the data you folks are not seeing. You're just seeing the summary on the very front end. This is the data that sits in the background, and it's all the data that's been uploaded to our systems, where I go through and do all the calculations on and filtering to come up with your values. So for this example, I went out and this happened to be for 5S2, which is to deal with students who have credit bearing hours that have attended classes. So when we actually looked at it, I said, well, the data set that I have only says one student was entered in. And you can see here when I filtered it on for the numerator, and only one student came up. So this came up to, okay, that does make sense. My initial report said one student. The data says one student. They're both female, so this is correct. And the course is correct, or excuse me, the program is correct. So then I would look at it one step further, say, okay, did something not get sent to us, or did something happen with Synergy? So this is where I go out to Synergy and I look at what you folks send to us to verify what possibly could happen. And this is what I had found when looking at it, that the school had a new person who started in their central office area and was submitting data to us and didn't realize CTE needed to submit this credit bearing report every year. So they did not upload it to us. So the problem still exists because that year they missed their indicator because the data wasn't submitted to us. But it's a simple fix. It's a fix where you say, oh, okay, next year we need to communicate better with our data folks to make sure they do submit this. There's no need to go much deeper in that, only because it's just a data issue at this time, not a program issue, not administrative issue, nothing along those lines. It was just a data collection concern. So that's something that your improvement plan could be as simple as we'll review data and data procedures to ensure that they get submitted in a timely fashion. And that became actually I believe that actually became the improvement plan that this school used, and it was perfect, and we worked together on it, and it was great. So, but that's how I go through the process to verify your data, and for both your needs assessments, and also for when I look at your data every year for your indicators. So both, whenever I see something kind of wonky, this is what I do. But with that said, we can look at Presque Isle, and Presque Isle is a different cat because something happened on their side, but it doesn't quite jive how this one did. So this is our opportunity to dig a little deeper to find out. So as we look at, now this is going to be looking at the data set that I just sent or has been uploaded this year, that you folks get from Grants for Me. Again, this is using Presque Isle, put in their code and got their data set. Now, when you look across this, just to start, just from a quick analysis, you can say, oh my God, 5S1, 100%, rock star, move on. I'm not going to spend much time on that. 2S1, 2S2, there's an issue with the data collection for 24, so I'm not going to concern myself with that. But we'll look at, 25, and we'll compare that to what I'm expecting my values to be, see if I'm on track. Is there something that might be off? Just what could possibly happen? And I'll do that down the line for the rest of them as well. And when I'm comparing years, then all of a sudden I come across 5S1. That looks a little weird because I'm like 20 percentages off. I'm like that doesn't really that doesn't happen very often unless you have very small numbers, which sometimes you can. So this is where I'd spend some time saying, okay, I'm going to look into this and see what happened this year to find out the difference between 24 and 25. So at this point, I'm going to go out to the actual spreadsheet that you folks all have in your Grants for Me. And again, this is Presque Isle's real data. There is no student information that I'm displaying. I remove as much student information as I can from the data before I give it to you in this kind of format. Even though it's hidden, it's got passwords on it, I still even remove the first and last name, birth date, and all that. And I do leave the student identifier, but I run it through a formula, so it changes it completely to something that's not related to the real student number, but it's consistently applied to everybody. It's correct. So as an example, looking at this, and I just highlight these just so we can see them a little quicker. But I know on yours they're all the same color. But when I look at the start, and I'm looking here, I'm going to focus some time on this because this is my biggest concern because it's way off. So I'm looking at 24, and thank you to all the directors out there who suggested last year or 2 years ago that I not use year one and year two because it's confusing to find out which year I was talking about. So now I just named it Y24 and Y25 to tell you what school year it is and then the indicator itself. So it worked out pretty well this way. So I'm looking at 24 and I'm going to pull it up and we have it broken down by program, which I want you to folks to look at and kind of take a peek at and come up with your own conclusions. But we're going to focus just some time just on the big numbers right now to kind of highlight this in the little bit of time that we have left. So I'm going to say for this indicator, the definition met. There was 57 students who met that definition. And in the numerator, there was 30 and 18. So I give you individual percentages. So you folks that have that right there for your reviewing. So you can see when you actually do all the calculations, it would come back to the same value because it uses the same data. But then we have to look down near the bottom of this. A little too far, apologize. So here is where we can look at something that is not, it's not, we have to report it, but it's not like you're not measured against it. But it is something we do send to the feds. But I include it just to help with some of the information that you get so you can kind of look at it a little differently as well. So here's the actual breakdown of the placements for this indicator. And one of them is wasn't able to contact. You can see the value of this is 9. So out of that 51 students, 9 students, I couldn't contact them. So that's a good amount, but it's not drastic, but it's still something to remember. And then you can look how the rest of them here, what they did for, that you're able to find information on. So it's all here broken down. So with that in mind, so we know, we'll go back to the top, we had 57 total kiddos. And we had, I think I'd write down it was here, 9 that we couldn't contact. So now I'm going to go over here and look at 3S1 for 25 to see if there's any big discrepancies. Well, first we see, well, we're down 10 kids. So that's a drop, not to be concerned, but just it's notable. It's 10 kids. So right now I know any additional kids that I can't contact are going to have a higher impact on my percentages because it's just a smaller number. So looking at the values, again, looking at it overall, then if I scoot down and look at unable to contact, 17. So we went from 57 to 47, 10 drop. We went from 9 to 17, almost double. So our survey pool went down and we're unable to contact. And since we're unable to contact, that counts against us even greater. So here is where we can start seeing why the discrepancy in our values of 20 points. So at this time, I would say, was there something that happened different between 24 and 25 as into why I'm getting less contact for 25? Did I change the procedure of collecting student email addresses and mailing address and phone numbers before they left school? Because remember, 3S1, we can't collect any data until after October on our kiddos. So maybe I didn't have their correct contact information, or maybe I didn't stress to some new instructors that it's best, you remember to tell your kids it's important that they follow up with us when we reach out to them to fill out the information or tell us what they're doing in October after they graduate and leave us. So maybe I forgot to tell that, So again, that's just another simple fix. But this is when you get this opportunity to kind of look at these values and say, that's why I'm off by 20. It's not that maybe I have to change everything and really retool a program or change programs or anything like this to increase my values. Maybe I just need better communications, or maybe I need to work with some of the programs that had low values. So you can come up here and say, which part of my program, which of my programs have the lowest values? They also have the lowest enrollments, but again, it's like here we had 100% and we had 8 kiddos and did pretty good, but here we had 4 and overall 25% return rate. Maybe I can work with these 2 instructors a little bit, or maybe I can work with these students a little bit to find out some more information to see how can we improve this. Now and again, it's just this program here, small numbers, but you can apply it overall to all of them to try to improve better outcomes for everything. But this is just that. This is how you use your data to kind of dig into looking at it. Now, we don't ask you to come back and tell us, well, this is what I found for this exact one or that one. We want you to give us in your narratives a kind of a breakdown of overall the process that you looked at and kind of what your findings were, and really how you're going to improve some of the areas that you need some improvement on. Now you can see when we looked at the beginning, Presque Isle has some great values. They are meeting all their indicators as we looked at before, but they still had a little bit of room they could work on, and they have this opportunity. So by looking at some of that local information and looking at where their programs are, they might be able to find some other areas of interest to help other indicators. It really is how I always think of it is like, we didn't want you folks, if you're doing a great job at graduation rate, we don't want you to put a lot of extra time on graduation rate because you're doing pretty good at that. Just maintain where you are, but put more time towards something that's a little lower. And that sounds simple, but historically, when we used to give out values to put, you had 0.2 of a point on everything, and you're already at 96%, but rest you at 96.12 or something. You're like, gosh, how do I squeeze more out of this lemon? It's hard to do. So we really want you to focus on the areas that need growth and your energy. So with that said, I also think I'm probably close to out of time. I thought I could get this a little quicker, but I didn't want to rush it, to the point where it didn't make sense either. So want to definitely respect your time but I pretty much that's what I wanted to cover and go through that demo of one program, one indicator to kind of see where we're looking at and kind of try to pull up what you can find locally as possibly a concern to kind of dig into. So with that, I do have a few minutes left. I'm happy to take some questions and see if there's any additional information I can provide and go from there.
Just a quick question, Sean. Can you hear me?
I sure can. I just muted. I didn't want to echo on you.
Yep. Your slide deck, you're going to share that. Is that possible?
Yep, I'll get that out to everybody. This is going to be recorded and it will be uploaded. And Melissa does a fantastic job in her emails to provide where that's going to be placed, and I'll make sure she does that. The slide deck will go out. What we'll probably end up doing is combining both slide decks together just to make it one file. But the actual recorded sessions might be 2, but we'll definitely get that out to everybody.
Thank you.
Sean, I have a question about 4S1, which is the non-traditional populations. It seems like when we looked at the data before, the numbers were pretty low. I mean, we're in Lewiston, so non-trad, we would have, we have more than what was indicated in the data at the time. So we're wondering if something's missing somewhere and if there's something we can do.
Yeah, definitely. What a lot of times what happens is, I shouldn't say a lot. Historically, when folks make an assumption that a certain program is male or female centered, and they believe when they do their calculations that to be so. What happens is they don't take into consideration that some programs don't count at all. They're what we call neutrals. So they're just removed from the counts. And that sometimes is why it varies so much. But I'm happy to do a couple things for us all. One is it's been something I asked Emily to do for me a while back, and I dropped the ball, not her. But I want to post on our website a link or a spreadsheet that has all of our programs and what we consider to be non-trad. So, for example, that spreadsheet would have automotive, and a female student would count as a non-trad student. Where, trying to think off the top of my head, and I could be wrong on this, but maybe culinary arts, maybe a neutral where it doesn't count either way. So those kind of programs, you would just remove those from the counts overall. But I'll get that some done and get it out to folks. One thing, but also I can follow up with you and look at your data directly to see if there's something that might be off. It could be 1 year we had an update that was done with our OIT folks, and they actually made a mistake on a program, and it threw off a couple numbers. And sometimes with a certain program, it could flip quite dramatically. But yeah, happy to look into it individually for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll let you folks go with a whole 3 minutes left to your day. So again, apologize, it took me a little bit long to get through this, but I do want to just take a second and also thank the Director Dorr and Director White. They're the ones who brought to my attention, first Director White and then Director Dorr, that I had mistakenly aligned the zip code, the actual number itself, with the cluster versus the actual title of the program. I look at zip codes so often I didn't even realize the words were off until I looked at them side by side. I do apologize for any confusion that caused with your spreadsheets. But if you look at the numbers themselves, they are spot on, so which is a big relief for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fix that? But again, do apologize for that hiccup, and I think Dwight docked me 40 hours for that, so he got his revenge. Just joking. Great. Well, I'll let you folks go. Have yourselves a wonderful day.